Hey, we're back. It's Pixitron. Today we're going to be focusing on some of the login sequence and also some underlying fundamental code that wraps up some of the question marks around jQuery. It's been kind of a struggle since we last talked, and I'm going to go through all of that with you. And then we'll probably add maybe one or two little features, but I've added a lot, so let's take a look. Okay, so I think the last time that we were talking, I was working on the login screen, and since then I've had some struggles. Let's talk about them. First of all, I chose to use jQuery Dialog. Now that's fine, and I still am using jQuery Dialog. What jQuery Dialog is doing for me is it's providing me with a windowing system. Now, jQuery does have a few drawbacks, and this is partially why I'm not sure if I'm going to update the GitHubs too much more. I might create a private GitHub. If you wanted to get the source code, maybe via the Patreon, you could purchase said source code, or at least a version of the source code that I could share with you. But there are some concerns. Partly, I don't want to... I've given you guys a great beginning, and you can follow along with the tutorials and learn about how I'm implementing. But I don't want you to believe that the way that I'm doing it is the only way to do it. You could be using React. You could be using Angular. There's just other ways to do this. There's Easy UI, which is built on jQuery and is not jQuery UI. There's UI Kit. There's just other things. And the problem with jQuery, the main issue, not responsive. At least not as easily responsive as, say, using Bootstrap instead of jQuery UI. You could use Bootstrap and jQuery, but the jQuery UI part is sort of dated. It's still out there and people use it, but it has its drawbacks. For one, you'll see here I'm putting in exact pixel values for the sizes of dialogues, and that's one concern. Because to change these, I would have to detect the size and multiply them by a ratio based on the size, and the orientation would have to change depending on size. But generally, we're working on a window that is automatically scaled to the size of your display, but in 4K, your dialog window is going to be very tiny versus, say, in 1080p. And if and when the industry moves to 8K, which probably would happen in 10 years, the game would have to be updated at that point to provide different sizes and things like that. So maybe, there's a couple of hacks. One is to tell the Electron framework to automatically zoom the window to a certain size. That would make the dialogues automatically bigger. We might end up doing that. But, this is fine for me for now. I think, and generally that's going to be okay. 8K is still a long time away. And by then, who knows what else will have changed. So, I don't know. This is how I'm doing it. But you could obviously use something else. So that's at least so far. I mean, the game itself is going to automatically scale depending on the size, but it may mean that the actual graphics are tiny. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Because I have a 4K and I can test on the 4K. But not that many users have 4K. It's still pretty much HD. I'm sure that's changing, and it's getting cheaper to get into 4K, but it still requires significant investment. A lot of people are going VR and things like that as alternatives. And there's UHD, which is and there's WHD, and there's just different sizes, and I don't know. It should be fine. For now, the way it is. Of course, I can always add to the options screen a way to change the UI size. Okay, so that being said, what has changed? So a lot, at least it looks that way. The old code is still starting here. I've added this button function that basically does a wrapping around all the on clicks. If you remember last time, I identified that you had to do an e dot prevent default or an event dot prevent default on every click type to avoid the window refreshing the page. So we've done that by creating a special um, function that just takes the div ID that you're going to be turning into a button and giving it an on click. So that's been done, and that's what this is all about. This just consolidated what was just a few calls. Initially, we had login. Sorry, this one right here is login. Now it's the same function that we had last time, where it grabs the data. In fact, I'm not even sure if this data was actually in it last time. I think we ended last time with me fixing the focus, so that's also been done. So basically, it just goes through the page, locates the username and password, and then plugs it in to a transmit. I've also created the networking utility file, library, whatever you want to call it. It's just a module that is going to allow us to do all of the networking in one area so we can keep an eye on it and keep it all wrapped up into that one area. So I created a net transmit function, and I'll show you that in a moment, as well as a bunch of, or rather a class called Windows, which is returned through a new require of a file called Dialogs. And Dialogs just wraps up some of the stuff you have to do for jQuery. So one of the things I learned while working with the jQuery dialog is that, while jQuery does provide a dialog, it doesn't really provide you with the best ways to control said dialog. If you remember last time, I struggled with the difference between close and dialog close. And in fact, that sort of like weirdness continued throughout the dialog experience. And since we are using it as the primary way to create and destroy any window that is not the game window, there's some serious needs to have some functions written around that. And so what we've done is we've created a jQuery dialog wrangler called Windows, and I'll just go through that class to start off here. So what Windows does is it's going to maintain those windows. One of the things that you had to do in jQuery dialog was maintain an idea of whether or not the dialog had ever been opened and if it was closed at this time. And the reason why is because you cannot call close twice. Like, for instance, if it was already closed or had never been opened and you called close, it would generate an error and then the scripts would stop working. So in order to kind of catch that error, you had to have sort of a list of the dialogues, which is what this entire class is based on. It allows you to create new dialogues, and a few of the options are in here. You can choose the div, and then you can give it a width and height. And QOC just means quit on close, and really all that's doing is setting whether or not it's the login dialog, because the only way to quit the game through exiting a dialog currently or closing a dialog would be on the login dialog itself. Every other, there's going to be an exit button, but there's, in order to quit the game and actually exit cleanly to your desktop without hitting Alt F4, which anybody can do at any time, you could override that. I have successfully overridden Alt F4, so you can't even quit it then. But I've undone that because it just doesn't make sense. But you could do that and make it so that you had to click the exit button. But there's no reason for that, unless, of course, it becomes an issue later. I don't really see it being an issue. So Alt F4 does still close the window, but it can be overridden so that it doesn't close the window. But regardless of that, we've got our login dialog has a special call to the .dialog from jQuery, which I'll show you down here. But just to finish the create, so it creates this. It does kind of log what it's doing. It creates a dialog object that contains the div ID, whether or not it's been opened, and then again, that special value, and then it pushes that to the array of dialogues, and that's contained within this class. All dialogues are going to be defined in the index.html, so any buttons or things that are just not too complicated, all of the basic wiring is going to go in there, and our goal is to keep that as simple as possible. So if you look back at index.html, you can see that it's just a bunch of calls to functions. There's not a lot of actual code in here. And then down here, there is a little bit of functions, but again, those are pretty simple so far. And some of them might have a few extra calls, just like this one does, that do specific things. This was an attempt to, it's when it opens the main menu, it seems to be selecting the first button because you can hit tab and up and down and stuff if you don't have access to a mouse, and what you do usually, especially if you're playing this game. So, but we've kept that in there for now, and this actually did not work, so I'm actually going to delete that. Basically, that was just simulating a click in the upper left-hand corner of the screen to kind of unselect that, but that wasn't working. So, I don't know. There's probably some obscure piece of JavaScript that will allow me to deselect everything on the panel, or maybe there isn't. I don't know, but it's okay that it does, even though it doesn't look all that great. But there is that added functionality, especially if you're using a console controller. It would be good to have the ability to use the console controller to simulate a tab or a shift tab or control tab, whatever it is, that allows you to select between different elements on the screen. And I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But basically, sometimes when I wanted a show main menu that would automatically open the main menu and close all the other windows. And so that's what this call is doing here. It's wrapped in this function show main menu, which is then called by this button, cancel main menu 1 through 5, which are the cancel buttons on the sub panels. If you imagine where we are at this point, we've got the login sequence. Once you've logged in, you then go to the main menu. Then there's like the options, find game, profile setup, all that stuff. And there's some logic in there that we haven't yet added, but that basic structure is now coming into play. And so we do have these functions that wrap common controls, and there's a show main menu options, which is slightly different than what will ultimately be the show options. So one of them pops up in front of the game window, the other one will close everything and pop up in front of the game window. So no big deal there, but just wanted to point out how this is structured. And then down here we have all of the text and the forms and the buttons, and we've got the main menu, and then the 5 buttons that are in the main menu. You're going to see all of this in a moment. And then all of the subpanels, which at this point only have save or cancel, or mainly just the cancel button, that allow you to sort of navigate through these different panels. And anybody who's played a game is familiar with these types of panels where you log in, you set your profile, you create a game or join a game. We're probably going to add a couple more to the main menu. I think one of them is, there's create game, but there needs to be like play single player. So that one will be in there, or like campaign, I guess, is the button. So we're going to be adding those buttons, and then once we have all of that, all of our main menus are done, and it's just up to us to create the game itself. So it's actually moving along rather quickly at this point. And it'll, I think probably the slower part will be going back and forth between the client and the server and creating all of the logic that runs in the game. But not to get too far ahead, let's get back to what we're looking at here. So in the dialogue, you can create it. You can then, it stores it in a numerically indexed array, but then that array, of course, has an ID for each dialogue, and you sort of have to play along. You can only have one ID per dialogue. Makes sense. You're only going to have one main menu. You're only going to have one create game. Anyway, it puts that on this stack or list, and then it's got find, so you can locate it again by its div ID. That's just for convenience. It actually does return the ID number, but this isn't that heavy, so you figure, I think you'd go through a list of like 30 items, so it's never going to be that big. And then this will be reused for the game itself. So if in the game is like an inventory panel or many of the other panels that are going to exist in the game. Each one has to be created and the logic behind it created. So we'll take a look at that and see what that means. And that's almost everything involves talking to the server. So if you go to pick something up, it's going to have to ask the server, can I pick this up? And the server's going to have to determine you can pick it up, or no, you couldn't pick it up, and here's the reason. Or likewise, the client, before it even asks the server, is going to also have to check. So that's validation. It happens in all websites, in all forms, at least properly done websites. So it's not an uncommon concept. In this case, it's for a game, and it's not for like entering your email address or telephone number or something like that. Okay, so then there's the open. This will set a dialog to appear. So all the dialogs are loaded in advance. They may not have all of the logic. Like, for instance, when you open the dialog, maybe it will, when you're opening it. So right after you open it, you might want to like run some, function that's going to go in and populate that dialog. But the dialog itself, the concept of that window, maybe it's the inventory management window, maybe it's the individual inspector window if you're looking in at like a player character or an NPC or an object or something like that. All those things can get populated, and obviously you could add more. You just have to give them a unique div ID, or if you have multiple of the same, you can at least keep track of their creation ID. And there's currently no way to destroy a dialog, but there is a way to close a dialog, which basically hides it. And this kind of all grew out of the realization that the .hide and .show functions that are in jQuery simply do not work properly with dialogs. And one of the things that I discovered is that despite the fact that it never will fully hide a dialogue, but it will hide only the content of the dialogue. So if you had a dialogue that was like, had a title bar and a close, if you do a .hide on it, it's sort of like when I don't know if you've ever used a UI, but that has roll-ups, but you can kind of do that. That's called a roll-up, right? And that's sort of what it's doing when you do a hide in jQuery. So this is all wrapped into a single file. It's actually not that long. It's only like 60 lines so far. I mean, there may be some additional things that we can put in here, but that's all that is there. There's not much in network either. So network is called at various moments, and all of the AJAX is going to be almost identical. I did have a couple of problems with this that I still haven't fully investigated, and it's still insecure. It's not using HTTPS. And what's worse is that I had to switch to GET. I'm not really sure why I had to switch to GET. I've read a couple of things. There's no reason that I can see that GET had to be used other than the rewrite conditions were causing an issue, but which is a server-side feature that allows me to kind of hide and move around your calls and such. I'm not sure why that was an issue. I certainly didn't have that problem when I was writing this for the other mobile application that I was working on with Poppy. But whenever I did do a request to Poppy, I got the post variables would disappear. And so I have to further investigate that. This may be CORS related, but obviously you don't want to be sticking a password into a get variable because that's part of the URL, and people who can view the error log will be able to see a clear text version of your password, and that's a big no-no. So I'll be investigating this further as I go, but all of the AJAX is going to be generally the same. Just for testing purposes, it's currently get. I just had spent so many hours working on that I needed to move on and get some of this other stuff done. So temporarily it's get, and it always uses JSON, and after several like sessions or hours or whatever many attempts, I did finally get it in the right format, and I actually added a little thing. So I now escape and then decode that escape sequence whenever I do send the data in the data tag, the data post variable, or get variable in this case. And that's because it just made more sense to be careful about that. And I had read some code online to learn something, and they were using it, and I thought, yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. So I did add that in there. So it's now not just JSON encoded, but it's also escaped. JSON does have that one issue where you can't store multi-line text, and I think we'll have to come up with a solution for that. There is one like simple little hack where you just allow them to do //n in a sequence, and they'll indicate, or rather, like a \n would mean new line, and so there's a way around that as well that might eventually come into play. But generally, I think this is pretty good. I do have another function called B64K encode, which is another option that we could re-implement in JavaScript. But for now, this is good, and it's a little bit more efficient than that, I think. I don't know. Well, it's certainly more standard. So also, you had to respond to a 400. So even when you have a successful transmission, but you've made a mistake, or if the user has made a mistake, like for instance, if they entered the wrong password, it does send status code 400 instead of 200. And we had to put a little bit of information in there about that. It's fine. Just a little special thing that had to be done. And so whenever I want to transmit to the API, all I have to do is call net transmit, create the same thing that I would in the backend. So let me just remind you about the backend here. Lostastronaut.com, and then Pixigame, right? Pixigame backend. So you remember we take these and we stick them into this, and that becomes the request. Well, this content is JSON, and it's basically generated at the point you pass a JSON object into output, and it turns it into the JSON string for you. So you can just write it in JavaScript. And I'll show you an example of it really quickly if we go to where the login occurs. So we went and we got the username. We went and we got the password. These are the DOM elements. So we're getting the div of the username and the div, or I'm sorry, the input type text and the input type password. And then we're going to transmit that. So we have this JSON object, action login, username, password. So that's all wrapped up and working pretty well. I've been able to test it, and I even have a way to show the error message to the user since they can be shown. And there's ways I could use the code or whatever to detect what kind of response it was. But generally, that's working pretty well. I'm able to log in. I'm able to type in the wrong password. The one thing I haven't done quite yet is sign up. Right now, I don't even have a function for it yet. But there is a sign up button, and it would be nice to maybe do that next. So that's probably going to be the next thing I work on. Maybe not tonight. I actually, this can't be too long of a video, but there's a lot's been done, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. So without further ado, I don't think there's any other major changes. I did add the font awesome CSS, and I did have to change a couple of things about it because you have to download the web fonts and put them in a specific place. But aside from doing that, everything else was just creating the network.js and dialogs.js functions. So because network.js is related to the Poppy backend, the Pixie game, Pixie PHP bridge, I mean, maybe some of this code will end up on the GitHub, but I don't really want to do much more than just the login page because it's really up to you. Like, what do you want your main menu to look like? Or do you not want to use jQuery after all? Or, what kind of game are you making with this? So, following along here, you're learning how to do a turn-based strategy game online, but you don't even have to do this stuff online. I mean, you don't even have to use the backend. You can just use Pixitron without the network and just write a Pixie.js game and use Pixitron to generate that executable on Mac, Windows, or Linux using Electron. So it's all up to you. I don't want people to think there's only one way. There's only one way to do these things. There's actually many ways to do these things, and I just noticed there's like all this crazy I guess that can be there. I don't know. There's this extra comma there. But anyway, let's run the game and let's see what it looks like right now. So npm start. Okay, so I've got this console window up, and we've got the bunnies in the background, which represents some sort of title sequence or something, demo, or I don't even know what's going to go back there. Maybe just fire. But we've got the login sequence, and then you've got create account, which doesn't work yet, but that works as a tab. And if you look really closely, you can see that there is like an orange box around the outside here, and that's what I mean by auto selected. Like when we first opened up the window, it looked like this, and this was selected, and that makes sense for tabs, but it's doing that with like everything. And when it comes to buttons, you see how they're different colors. Well, when the button is selected, it looks like that, and that kind of throws off the aesthetics slightly, but it's fine. I guess I could use a hidden button or something like that, or maybe some way to do that, but not really sure yet if I want to bother to do that. Again, because we want to be able to use the console controller. Okay, so I'm going to type the wrong password, so we'll just type that in there, and I'll click login, or I could hit return. And it actually does know what happened there. It says, email's not validated or no password set. Well, that's actually incorrect. It really should say bad password there, so I'll have to look into why it would return that. But if I type guest, which is the password temporarily, if you remember from an earlier video, click login, I'm now logged in, and my session is active for at least 5 minutes, unless I do a keep alive, and there actually is a next step on network keep alive that I'll add in there. In fact, maybe I'll do that today before the video ends to kind of show you what I mean by that, but you need to keep your session active. If you click log out, the client forgets about the session, but the session is still technically open until you log in again. So something to think about. Maybe 5 minutes is too long. It probably depends on a couple of factors, but it will know how long it's been since there was a keep alive. So, I can still detect, has it been 90 seconds since we heard from this client? And really every like 5 to 10 seconds, we should be saying, I'm still here. I'm still here. Otherwise, we won't know if somebody disconnects for 5 minutes or something like that. So it's also important because we don't want, like, say, for instance, the guy got up and went and got a glass of water, came back, drank some water, and then was like, whoa, I got disconnected. That would be bad, right? Because what would you do? I mean, there was no reason for that, especially if you're just sitting in a game lobby waiting for other people to get ready and you haven't clicked anything. There's nothing that... It's just, the keep alive is good. Another thing that's going to happen during the keep alive is that you can, at that point, ask the server, hey, do you have any messages or notifications I need to show the user? Is there any updates? Did the game end? Is it my turn? Like, things like that can happen during the keep alive. So it's important, and it's up to the client to do this. The server is only pushed forward by activity of the clients. And so if the clients all collectively stop working, then the server is not doing anything for those players. And likewise, if all of the players of a game, it's just over like that. The server, the next time somebody logs in, might check, or during a maintenance routine might check and say, oh, this game died. But it's not that much of a resource hog. I mean, we're talking about like only like at maximum a megabyte of space, but probably far less than that. Probably just like, I don't know, 100, 200K of space that we're taking up by having that game active. So no big deal. But just to demonstrate, these buttons do work, and you'll see here again the orange outline, which is indicating that, I could just make that outline disappear, but it's useful. Just you'll notice when I come into this menu in the very beginning, profile is selected like that, and so that's one of the little aesthetic struggles I'm going through, like how to fix that. I finally did get hovering working on these buttons. It wasn't working in the beginning. But yeah, eventually there'll be a create game dialog here, and the options for that game will be there. Here's a find game dialog. We've got an options dialog that's going to have some options there. Like maybe one of them is, like I don't know, size of the UI. I think we just talked about that. And I'm not really sure. Can't really zoom this. I'll have to see about that. And I can actually close this window, although there wasn't one error. What was that one error? Bad request. Yeah, and that's no big deal. That's why I have that catch there. So anyway, I can log out, and once logged out, there are these other options that don't work yet, like create account, play offline, but we do have that create account on the back end already completed, untested. Knock on wood or whatever, but you should be able to type in some information here and click sign up and get back an email that allows you to activate your account and then log in. So I don't know, should be okay. And I decided that we would probably do a play offline because I think that's important, and so I've got that panel as well. These buttons don't do anything yet. That's all that does. That's what an alert window looks like. It says Pixitron and then the message, and then log in. And, I can log back in. Now I have a new session. And, it keeps track of that session ID locally. So let me just exit this and show you around the network JS again real briefly now that we've seen what it does. So if you... So I changed the application ID to just the word Pixie Game for now. That's true on the back end. This has to match the back end, and so it does. Obviously, that's going to be some sort of huge, crazy hash code eventually, but for now, that's what it'll be. And I haven't actually inspected Electron executables yet, but there's a possibility that it may need to be encrypted in some way or like hidden or obscured further than that. So we'll see what we can do. In fact, you could even ask the server, what is your current, but that's not good either. So I'm not really sure what we should do. We'll figure that out eventually. So you could have like a SSH key or something, but that seems a little extreme, especially if it had to change, but it wouldn't be able to change. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so in network, we've got the net keep alive going on here. What we don't have yet is this set on a timeout. So I think what we'll do is we don't even have to call it net keep alive, but it's good to do that. So we're going to do a set interval function net keep alive. All right. And this is a milliseconds value. I think every 5 seconds is fine for now. Maybe maybe it should be faster. I just don't see. It means 5 seconds is the minimum amount of time, or the maximum. Well, yeah, the maximum amount of time it would take for a message to arrive at a user given from one user to another. That is actually kind of long, but the game itself won't be affected by that. It's just things like chatting. So I could increase this to say 1,000, but I don't want to bother the server too much either. So I'm going to leave it at 5 seconds for now. Maybe that'll be an option, but I doubt it. Something like that. Maybe 2 seconds is better. I mean, does it really matter if you haven't heard from somebody in several seconds? But I'm going to leave it at, I don't know. And then I think it's a good idea to add a random value here. So I think it's like math.random, but let me just look up JavaScript random integer. So you want to add a couple of random function or random values after this, because it's important to, let's say, like, I don't know, 100, because you don't want everybody coming in at the same exact moment. Not that this necessarily guarantees that, but it increases the chance that two clients that are started at the exact same moment on two different computers are going to have not only the latency as being a small factor, but also like each one is going to be moving at a slightly different pace. So if it is every 2 seconds, like it's set to here, then it's going to be every 2 seconds and maybe a little bit longer for some people. So there's no guarantee, but it'll be under 22.1 seconds, basically. So in net keep alive, if there is an active session, so if you look at the top here, active session is null. When you log in, it actually sets your active session. So that's done. I don't know if that's even done yet, but it actually occurs here. So let's see. How would that occur? Log in, function D, which means that it was successful. Well, let's do active session equals, and it might be like network dot active session or something. Well, I might have to create it as an official module because currently only Windows is the official module. Active session equals, then I think it's like d dot response json dot session. And just as we're testing, we're going to go alert active session, I guess. So we don't need login dialog.hide anymore either. Okay, that should do it if this is correct. This might be session ID or something like that. Let's find out. I think it's just session. So the way we're going to find out is we're going to open up our git bash and we're going to do npm start. I don't know why I'm typing the dot there, but all right. All right, that something happened there. Oh, uncut error. Oh, there's a problem in the file. So let's look at that problem. I forgot to close the function. Or actually, no. I need to put that there. All right, that should take care of it. Put that there. All right. Let's close that. Let's get out of this. All right. Cannot read property session of undefined. Okay. So that's not worse, but it's maybe I spelled something wrong. So why would that be undefined? All right, we're just going to console.logd right there. Make sure that we're getting everything we need to. Close that down. All right. All right. So it does know when you have. Oh, it's just being unclear about the password. So it really should give you the right response there. Okay, it died out. So it's just d.session. Okay. So I just made it easier. And I got rid of the response JSON part. Okay. I think the reason why with the other one I send the parent class is because you need maybe some of the data in that. So, all right. So it should work this time. Let's take a look. Lost instrument. Again, enter does work. Oh, we've got a session now. Okay, so we've got a session. I'm not really doing anything with that information, but when we have that session, it's gonna run this network keep alive. So whenever you log out, it actually sets the session to null, and you don't have a session, and so it thinks it's logged out. Let's go ahead and I don't know. What would we do? Well, we'll have to create a backend thing for that. But I guess I can console.log keep alive. Okay. So let's try this one more time, and then that'll be the end of the video. Okay. So yep. And then the third one, and then the fourth one, fifth one. So at any, in fact, I think it could be slower. Yeah. But that's pretty fast. And so you've got your notifications coming in from, from that request that we haven't yet written yet, that will go to the server and ask, hey, what's the deal? Do I get a chance to have a notification? Did you receive my message? Did I get logged out? So I think another thing we're going to do right now is just create like a placeholder graphic image. So if you've never used cooltext.com, again, not being paid to say this, but kind of a neat way to make a little like burning thing, whatever. So cooltext.com, I think we're going to do burning. We'll do flaming. And then we just got to come up with a cool font. So, right. I don't know. What font do we want? Right. So I like that, except that I want to change things about it. But anyway. I want to change this color here, but what's fire looks cool, but it's not actually. Oh, that's way cooler. There's also this, well, whatever. I like this. I wish I could change more about it. Is there other things? No. What's composite? Neat little way to get like a GIF or something made for you. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, I don't know. Oh. I can change this. What's it look like there? Whoa. I actually kind of like that, actually. Let's try a different font, something a little bit easier to read, maybe a little bit more appropriate to the genre. I've used this font before, so let's see. I like that. It's kind of neat. I want to make it bigger. Let's make it like crazy big. Unfortunately, there's an error on our web server. Something did not work out. Let's try 148. All right. How about 125? Nope. Okay. How about 100? Huh. Okay. Well, we'll take that one. Let's see what else we got. So that's it for the animated. These are just the options. I mean, they're all cute in their own way. I think we're going to stick with Molten Core Fireball. Change the font. What's classic? Whoa. Oh, it's like truly classic. Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Hey, that looks pretty good, but let's do a different one. Ooh, retro. I think retro is important. Let's see. Certainly appropriate to this channel. I like this. Fireball. Oh, now I gotta say, that is pretty good. Don't you agree? Let's see if we can make the text a little bit bigger. Okay, how about a little bit bigger than that? All right, how about bigger than that? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Nice. Now that is a cool gamey thing. So we're gonna get that. We're gonna create that logo. Wow, it's even bigger. All right, I think that looks beautiful. It's time to get that logo. Not sure if I clicked or not. Let's try it again. Well, we're definitely gonna rip that out of the page, make sure we have it, but oh yeah, Fireball. Now we can try this. All you have to do is, yeah. So all we have to do is go down here and click like fire. Yeah, fire is boring. Burning. Fireball. What was that? Retro font? Retro font. Roost heavy, so we know it's that font. We definitely want to get that font. 200. See it. Up. I don't know. I think I liked it better the other way, so I think we're gonna stick with that other one. I do want to. Ooh, that's cool. Lava. There's another one. Lava. Let's go back to the original that we had. I mean, this can be hours. You can imagine all the things you will do with this. So I want to decide on one, but I want to thank you so much for watching. I want to encourage you to go to the Patreon. I want you to keep working with Pixitron. I want you to look at more jQuery. Yeah, that's pretty cool too. And check out Cooltext. It's a cool way to like make a little thing. Yeah. So, like, subscribe, bell, and I wish you the best. Until next time, this is Retrofriends.